2022, one of our last events today, and welcome to our Town Hall. Town Hall on the Abraham Accords. 2 years ago, we didn't have a member of the Israeli cabinet present here in Munich due to an upcoming election in Israel, if I remember correctly. I'm sure Benny Gantz remembers it. Exactly. So, as part of our program, we had a town hall on Palestine with Prime Minister Steyer speaking, and quite a few Israelis in the room, including a young member of the Knesset, and Charlotte Knobloch was also present. And we had a fascinating discussion. Today, we are delighted to welcome Benny Gantz, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Defense of Israel, who will start off our town hall in a moment. And we are also delighted to welcome Dr. Anwar Gargash, diplomatic advisor to the President of the United Arab Emirates, who will speak via video, and Undersecretary Abdullah bin Ahmed Khalifa of Bahrain. We have a great audience in this town hall, and we look forward to a lively discussion with audience members coming in, because that's the way this is supposed to work. Do we know that Dr. Anwar is online? We know. Okay, that's good, Cornelia.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, welcome, Dr. Anwar. Good to see you. Lovely.
Thank you.
Deputy Prime Minister, you have the floor. And we can give you a round of applause, perhaps, for being here.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Ambassador Ruga, thank you very much for your kind introduction and hospitality. These are significant times for global peace and for stability in the Middle East. Challenges emerge alongside historic events that are reshaping the region. Partnerships are being built between leaders. Peace is forged between countries, and friendships are made between people. Peace is achieved by courageous leaders, such as His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed and His Majesty King Ahmed Khalifa, whom I had the great honor of visiting just a couple of weeks ago. It is also led by leaders such as King Mohammed VI of Morocco. I will never forget the collective prayer we held in the synagogue in Rabat, praying for the well-being of the king, and at the same time, praying for Israel's peace and security. I carry this prayer with me here today. This is the time to thank the previous US leadership and former Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu for achieving the Abraham Accords, and to thank the current US administration and European partners who are assisting Israel in expanding and deepening ties with partners in the region, and for investing in the security of the Middle East. We are opening the gates of Middle East to cooperation that will strengthen our economies, spread innovation, and contribute to a regional stability and security. Our hands are extended in peace to new brave leaders in the region who are prepared to develop relations with Israel, and I am certain it will not be long before these partnerships are built and exposed. As a former Chief of Defense Forces, and as the leader of Israel's defense establishment, I must say my delight and honor were exceptional where I landed in Morocco, Bahrain, and other countries, and was received with so much warmth. Let me tell you this. In war, the winner gets to lose as well. In peace, we are all winners. Now, as clouds of war are gathered above us, it is the responsibility of the world leaders to spread calm, to promote discourse, and to uphold the principles that will preserve world peace and security. This should be the approach towards the conflict in Ukraine, and I call on all parties, even if we are in the last minutes, everything must be done to prevent bloodshed. We are currently at critical times for global security, as well for the stability and peace in the Middle East. Iranian aggression is rising, not just in nuclear program, but also in its regional attacks. Iran takes over failed states, forcing them to defend Iranian interests while committing severe human rights violations. We view with great concern the attacks conducted against our partners in the region, attacks that, according to our assessments, are being carried out under the guidance and approval of Iranian leadership, employing weapons, some of which are produced in Iran, and implementing know-how, operational know-how gained in Iran. We also see what is happening in Iraq when Iran is currently trying to intervene with its Quds force in center of influence, despite the loss of their supporters in the last elections. Iran exploits civilian flights from Tehran to Damascus International Airport to transport weapons under the illusions of civilian equipment. Iran also endangers the life of innocent civilians by transferring weapons in containers that arrived to the port of Latakia. Iran violates the freedom of navigation. Even worse, Iranian UAV attacks have claimed innocent lives, such as the British and Romanian civilian killed in the Mercer Street attack off the Gulf Coast. Iran also endangers civilian flight, which could be hit by UAVs that cannot change courses. Iran is responsible for arming proxies in Lebanon and undermining the country's governance. Just last week in Israel, we saw a number of Hezbollah attempts to violate Israel's sovereignty. In this context, I have a clear message for Hezbollah. Their operatives are familiar with the noise made by our airplanes and with their capabilities. If we are required to respond to the attack in order to defend ourselves, we will do so, and we will cause great damage to the terror organization and its surroundings. The state of Lebanon will unfortunately have to be held responsible. We will not hesitate to act anytime and anywhere to ensure Israel's security. In facing such challenges, we must stand strong, united, determined. A nuclear deal, if signed with Iran, does not mark the end of the road. Action must be taken to ensure that Iran does not continue to enrich its additional facilities, and oversight must be increased. It is essential that the IAEA continues to investigate and monitor the open files. We must ensure that the advanced centrifuges are not found in other facilities. Development of ballistic missiles capable of carrying nuclear warheads must be stopped. It is critical that the sunset clause is not understood as an expiration date that enables Iran to revisit its nuclear ambitions. All steps must be taken to ensure that Iran never becomes a nuclear threshold state. The world must never come to terms with it, and Israel will never come to terms with it. Distinguished guests, in 1987, US President Reagan arrived in Berlin. From the Reichstag building, he saw a graffiti spray painted on the Berlin Wall that said, "This wall will fall, for it cannot withstand faith." We as leaders have a duty to believe in peace and partnership between our nations. It is imperative to bring down the walls between us. The stronger and more united we stand as partners, the more we cooperate in facing challenges, the greater peace, stability, and prosperity we will enjoy. We must strive for peace for our people and security for our countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister Gantz. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. And my name is Stuart McKennett. I'm the Washington Post's international security correspondent, and I'm happy to welcome you all here and our viewers online to the discussion with the title, Abraham Accords, Piece by Piece. Our aim is to make this as interactive as possible, so you, ladies and gentlemen, here in the audience can ask questions, so can people at home who are viewing this via the QR code. But again, questions, so please short questions with a question mark at the end. I would also like to welcome Abdullah Khalifa here with us in the hall, and Dr. Anwar Gargash. Dr. Gargash, is he still here? Because I don't see him. Okay, he is.
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Thank you, welcome. Actually, let me ask you, after the remarks of the Deputy Prime Minister, can you explain to us what has actually changed for you in the UAE since the Abraham Accords?
Saad, first of all, I'm very happy to be here with you, although from some distance. But I think the first thing is, in my assessment, the Abrahamic Accords are one of the most significant strategic developments in the region for many, many years. And I think time will prove that. I think from the UAE's perspective, we tried to do three things with the Abrahamic Accords. I think number one is to break psychological barriers. So the Abrahamic Accords actually breaks down a lot of psychological barriers that have sort of compounded over the years in the Arab-Israeli issue and beyond in the region. And I think it has played an important part, and the potential that it has in separating what is cultural and civilizational and religious from what is political. And I think that is the first important thing. I think this is very important from the UAE's perspective, because we do feel that the region needs some sort of agenda of tolerance, and that the Abrahamic Accord fits very well into that. I think secondly, the UAE, especially after a very difficult decade in the Arab Spring, is pursuing what I call an agenda of stability and prosperity. And with that, I think using the economy, using investment as a tool, a visionary tool to change the region is extremely important. From where you're sitting in Munich, I can think of visionaries such as Jean Monnet and Robert Schuman, who really changed the structure of how Europe looked and how Europe looks at issues, political issues, through economic cooperation and economic vision. And I think this is one of the tools. So if you really look today, our trade with Israel since the start of the Abrahamic Accord is almost close to $1.5 billion already. We've had 123,000 Israelis visit just the city of Dubai, not the whole of the UAE. These are since the beginning of the Abrahamic Accords. And think about it, there is COVID and there are travel restrictions. So really, we have suffered a lot in the last decade from an agenda that was purely political and confrontational. And we see the Abrahamic Accord as part of that agenda of stability and prosperity. I think the third issue also is to contribute to the issue of peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. I don't see that the Abrahamic Accords in itself is the sort of magic wand that will resolve everything. But we have been able, for example, through the Abrahamic Accords, to stop the annexation of the Palestinian lands in the previous Israeli government. For example, during the recent flare-up of violence between the Palestinians and Israelis, our foreign minister spoke to the former Israeli foreign minister 6 times in 11 days, and was another element in supporting the Egyptian ceasefire, which ended all these. So for me, the Abrahamic Accord is not political reflex. It really is a substantive, strategic change and the beginning of many good things to happen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anwar. Dr. Al-Khalifa, can you describe to us what has changed in Bahrain on the ground since you have this agreement with Israel?
Well, thank you very much, Suad. I'm delighted to be invited to speak in this distinguished panel. The relationship between the Kingdom of Bahrain and the State of Israel stands as a testament on how peace can bring about stability and prosperity, both on a bilateral level as well as on a regional level. This has always been the vision of His Majesty, King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa. From the hosting of the Peace to Prosperity Workshop in 2019 to open a dialogue on economic cooperation for the benefit of the people of the region, and later with the signing of the Abraham Accord in 2020. Today, as we look back at the milestones that we achieved together with Israel in the past 17 months since the establishment of relations between our two countries, we have established embassies, we have exchanged ambassadors, we have signed 38 agreements and MOUs in a broad sector of political, economic, and social fields. We have launched a direct flight via Bahrain's national carrier Gulf Air since the 30th of September of last year. And as these milestones remain crucial in setting a solid foundation for the cooperation between our two countries, the aspirations remain high, and what is yet to come is even more astonishing. We are working closely with Israel on developing a 10-year joint war and peace strategy, one that would synchronize our goals, one that would specify and indicate the key areas of interest between our two countries, and it will bring our officials, our experts, our peoples closer together into building a better future for the peoples of the two countries. These areas include innovation and technology, trade and investment, healthcare, environmental protection, sustainable energy, education, religious and cultural coexistence. And finally, I believe sharing a joint vision and a strategy would showcase the fruits of peace, but will also show that peace is indeed a cornerstone for stability and prosperity in the region, and it will crush any existing doubts and skepticism that are meant to serve certain agendas to keep the current status quo, and it would encourage others who are seeking change to follow in our footsteps.
I'm also hearing a lot about, security challenges, and you, Deputy Prime Minister, mentioned in your speech Iran quite often. Would you say that the fear of Iran has actually helped to bring all of you together, or much faster together than it was planned?
Yeah. I think there are two sides to this coin. Definitely, Iran, as I've tried to explain, is a global, it's a regional challenge, and it's not only threatening the state of Israel. We have seen it attacks on Saudi, we have seen it attacks on UAE. So definitely this is an issue that we all have the same concern of. But on the other hand, we must emphasize the positive side of what I would like to portray as the full half glass of wine, if you wish, of our relations. Unbelievable to think of, like a few years back, that we will talk about the same strategic vision, cooperation between the countries, organizations, and friendship between the people themselves, and so many people are traveling from one place to another. I think that these Abraham Accords are really a major change in the last several decades. As I said, it's part of both the exception of the existence of Israel as part of the Middle East, as well as the braveness of the leaders of all sides. And I think it's just the beginning. What my friend just said, you know, so many agreements has been launched in a year and a half. Just imagine yourself, where can we be in 2, 3, 4, 5 years ahead? I hope we move
Deputy
forward.
Prime Minister, but the question was, do you think that the fear of Iran has
Yeah,
brought
I think it had some impact, but it's not the only issue. I said this is one issue, but there are other positive issues as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Dr. Anwar, speaking about recent attacks, your country as well as Saudi Arabia have been attacked recently by drones and missiles. Did you feel that you had enough support from your new allies in the region? Did you feel that Israel helped the UAE and Saudi Arabia enough, especially UAE since you joined officially?
I don't think we seek that Israeli support. We were very grateful, of course, with the statements of support by all countries, including Israel. But I don't think that this is really where we were seeking the support. I think we have a very professional and capable military that will address any terrorist attack. And of course, when you attack civilian targets, this is clearly a terrorist attack and provocation. And of course, your expectation is that your traditional allies will honor their commitments, will stand by you, and will be there for you. Because I think as we move forward, this sort of militias that are not even government, with these sort of deadly weapons targeting civilians, is a big threat to the region, a big threat to the civilians. This is something that we will not accept, and we will move, the earth upside down to ensure our security, and we'll make sure that we do that.
Dr. Al Khalifa, I would like to jump to another topic, actually. Your country, as well as the UAE, as well as Morocco, have been heavily criticized for joining the Abraham Accords by especially supporters of the so-called Palestinian cause. And you have been criticized and accused of selling out the Palestinian cause. What is your answer to such criticism?
Well, since the signing of the Abraham Accords on the 15th of September of 2020, there has been lots of speculations that surfaced in the region. Many have supported and admired this move and expressed full support to it. Others have rejected it because it contradicts with its diverse and extremist agendas in the region. And the majority of the people were silent. They ranged from skepticism to cautious optimism. And I believe one of the main challenges would be to try to get as much support as possible from the latter group. As for the Palestinian cause, Bahrain's position has been and will always be in support of the Palestinian cause. This is a particular matter that is in the cornerstone of Bahrain's foreign policy. Establishing relations with Israel does not mean abandoning or changing the position of Bahrain towards Palestine and the historical rights for the Palestinian people to establish their own independent state with east of Jerusalem as its capital. All of the countries, Bahrain, the Emirates, Morocco, and Sudan, are for this two-state solution, as well as in support for the Arab Peace Initiative. In fact, we do believe that signing the Abraham Accords and having relations with Israel will, in fact, take us a step closer towards that, because we do believe that only through dialogue, through engagement, through mutual understanding and respect, that would happen. This is expected. We realize that. And we also do realize that within the Israeli government, there's not a single position across that. We understand that. But again, we have our engagements, we have our talks with our colleagues within the Israeli Foreign Affairs. And I recall the last visit of Foreign Minister Lapid to Bahrain on the 30th of September of last year, where he held a press conference with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Abdullah Khalifa. And he said publicly in a press conference that he does support the two-state solution. So having an Israeli foreign minister saying that from Bahrain is unprecedented. We do realize it might not represent the official stand of the Israeli government, but at least we realize there are different views across the different political parties in Israel for different solutions.
So let's ask the Deputy Prime Minister, what are your views? Are you supporting the two-state solution? And why is it possible to have an agreement with Bahrain, the UAE, Morocco, Sudan? And why is it so difficult to get an agreement with the Palestinians?
Well, those are two different yet completing issues. As said, I believe that the Abraham Accords are strengthening the process of bilateral talks and regional talks between Israel, the surrounding countries, and the Palestinians, that eventually we will find ways of coexisting with one another, respecting one another, while ensuring the security of the State of Israel. I believe that eventually we will find ourselves in a two-entities solution in which we respect the Palestinian sovereignty and governance, but yet we will be respected for our security needs, and it's a bilateral issue between us and the Palestinians. I must say that we cannot ignore the existence of the Palestinians, and the Palestinians cannot ignore the existence of us Israelis in the area, and we must find ways of living with one another. Both sides should take historic decisions as well. It started as an autonomy by Begin and Saadat. It moved forward with the conference in Spain. It moved forward with the Oslo Agreement, and I hope that one day we can create a new reality, but it will have to take the realities as it is on the ground between us and the Palestinians. As you know, I met with the Palestinian President Abbas twice already. I think we must maintain strategic connection. I think we must maintain security considerations, and I'm sure we must promote economy. And slowly but surely we will separate from one another and create a better reference for future discussion of how should the permanent agreement will look like.
So did I hear, Deputy Prime Minister, that you say two-state solution is possible?
I didn't say two-state solution because it takes us to a former framework, and it's a phrase that gives the illusions of 1967 borderlines, etc., things that cannot happen. This is why I said two-entity solution, that we will verify with one another how we can ensure the Palestinian rights on one hand, but we definitely need to ensure our rights, but our security demands. So every time that people talk about it, and they ask me, we must make sure that the Palestinian sovereignty is being taken care of. I am saying at the very same time, we must make sure that we take care of Israel's security needs at the same time. Not before we bridge those two issues, we can come to a permanent future agreement. I think we need to create a better reference in which we will speak from, and I think we haven't reached this better reference yet.
The foreign minister of Saudi Arabia said yesterday during one of the conversations here that the kingdom would not be able to join the Abraham Accords until there will be a solution in this. Are these the conversations you have with Saudi Arabia as well?
I hope that we will find a way to mitigate the different gaps and the different positions. But let us see the reality as it is. You can have two flanks of the Middle East. You will have the northern negative flank influenced by Iran in northern Iraq, in Syria and Lebanon. This is the radical front. But you can see the peace camp on the other side, starting from countries like Bahrain and Saudi and UAE and Israel, and hopefully others will join in hands. Though we don't have agreement on everything, we will figure out a way of coexisting and cooperating between one another. And I'm sure that what I would call the peace flank will overcome the radical one.
Dr. Anwar, may I ask you, when you hear what the Deputy Prime Minister says now about the negotiations or the conversations with the Palestinian side, do you think you're on the same page here with him?
I think, Saad, the Abrahamic Accords is about visionary thinking of our region. Our region has suffered from this Manichaean view of black and white for a very, very long time. And not talking to Israel and not contacting Israel and not having any relations with Israel has truly been a failed policy. I mean, there are no results to show here. I think that what Egypt has done many years ago, what Jordan has done a bit later, and the Abrahamic Accords today, show a much more realistic course. We have to really address the challenges in the region, and the challenges in the region are very, very diverse, and they are about a region that needs to create jobs. They are about a region that needs prosperous, a region that needs to be stable. And of course, we are there to help the Palestinians. And as my colleague from Bahrain said, our political position remains the same and firm as part of the Arab consensus. I think what has changed is the realization that dialogue is the way forward. And without talking, without laying out our differences, we've seen the results of this policy of the last 70 years, and there's very little really for anybody, for the Palestinians or others. So as we move forward, I think we need to think of a region that needs to be prosperous, a region that needs to be stable, and a region through these connections creates, in my opinion, reservoirs of trust. And through these reservoirs of trust, many of the complications over the last years, we are able to disentangle and build on. We've tried the old way, and the old way has failed miserably. I think the way forward is what we have seen with Egypt and Jordan, and what we are proposing of a warm peace is the way forward, and I'm sure we can create much better results through this approach.
Thank you very much. Before I open up for questions from the audience, let me ask you, we have learned in the past couple of months that there was possibly some kind of cooperation long before the Abraham Accords came together. And I'm talking about cooperation when it comes to cybersecurity or selling, helping in security, on security measures. And I'm talking about, for example, the selling of the Pegasus program to a few of the countries that are now here with us in the discussion. I would like to ask you, Deputy Prime Minister, did you actually have a cooperation when it comes to selling such spyware to countries like, if it's true, Bahrain or the UAE long before the Abraham Accords? And where do things stand now in terms of?
Obviously, I cannot refer to issues that were done secretly between different governments and export license we have, but all those export licenses were under a very specific guidance of what can be done with those kind of things and what should not be done by those things. And that's the way I think it should continue. We do things between us, but we must make sure that we respect one another conditions on different issues. That was the case before, and that is the case indeed here. With your permission, Suad, I would like to refer to this gray reality, as rightly said my friends from the UAE. My first operational mission as a soldier in the IDF way many years back was to secure President Sadat aircraft when he came to speak peace in Jerusalem in 1977, 1978. I have used the very same aircraft when I came to visit Bahrain. And I'm sure that the trends of peace, of dialogue and cooperation will enhance us much more than just a constant refusal by this side or another to talk about an issue, and I'm sure that we will take it forward.
I would also just to raise the question with you, Dr. Khalifa, and you, Dr. Anwar. Your countries have been accused recently in articles of using spyware against human rights defenders or journalists, for example. Would you like to comment on this?
Well, accusations are endless. If we go through that path, we'll never finish. But speaking of the security cooperation, there has been lots of speculations when relations were established between Bahrain and Israel, especially on the security intelligence front. There is intelligence cooperation between Bahrain and Israel. The Mossad is in Bahrain, and they're present in the region.
Are you making comments or are you being sarcastic? I just want to make sure that everybody understands that.
If you'll allow me to finish, please.
Please, by all means, I just want to make sure you explain.
If this security cooperation between Bahrain and Israel would mean providing more stability and security, so be it. If it would mean saving the lives of innocent civilians, so be it. That is why, during a number of visits for the head of the Mossad to Bahrain, it was publicly announced in the Bahrain News Agency, probably for the first time. It was announced back in September 2020 and in May 2021 that, yes, the head of the Mossad was received by his counterpart in Bahrain. Okay. So we do believe security cooperation, intelligence cooperation is part of our ongoing partnership between Bahrain and Israel, and it will continue.
So have you used NSO spyware against human rights defenders?
Can you repeat your question?
Have you used NSO spyware by the name of Pegasus against human rights defenders?
Just as the minister has specified, this matter has been dealt with previously, and publicly the company has announced that there was no dealing with Bahrain.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Anwar, would you like to comment? And then I would like to open up for the audience, please.
Saad, relations, when we started talking about the Abrahamic Accord, the American role was essential. Not only important, the American role was extremely essential. Because practically, we had no relationship with Israel. All these security relationship, news, etc., they don't really amount to something that can actually be a conduit for political relationship. When we started our relationship with Israel, we had to start with the basic alphabet. Recognition of passport, understanding this and that. It was as if we started from zero between two countries that have no relationships. Relationships between countries, bilateral, are not built on security contracts. They are much, much more strategic, wider, and I have to, applaud really the American role in arriving at that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anwar. I would like to open now for questions from the audience. I think we have one comment from Hannah Neumann. And please, if you could introduce yourself also to our distinguished speakers here.
Sure. My name is Hannah Neumann. I'm a member of the European Parliament and head of the delegation with the Arabian Peninsula. So two of the speakers here, I know them very well. And having an official panel with representatives from Bahrain, UAE, and Israel in one room, halfway in one room, is something as a peace builder that makes me very happy. I have last year taken the flight from Abu Dhabi to Doha. That was special. Today, or hopefully this year, I will take the flight from Abu Dhabi to Tel Aviv. I still haven't given up hope that there may be one day a flight from Abu Dhabi to Tehran, but I understand this may be a shaky road and may take another while. But what we can clearly see is that the GCC countries, from being squeezed in between Israel and Iran, have moved towards an approach of reaching out, which I think gives you a lot more agency and gives the region quite a positive outlook. But the question that we have heard here also as the title of the panel is Peace by Peace, using peace, well, in the double meaning. And what I heard today about the advancements that we have seen, especially when it comes to business, when it comes to flight connections, I also know there's something going on in education. It's of a transactional nature. It's to everybody's benefit, transactioning goods, education, whatsoever. And Dr. Gargash, you referenced the European Union as an example, and first of all, I'm very proud that you do that, and I'm happy that we are still a bit of this shining light. But I can tell you from our European Union experience, peace is more and is a longer way. First of all, healing wounds and combating prejudices is something that has to come with people-to-people exchange, with partnerships, with dialogues, with also talking to each other if you're not of the same opinion, and having this tough talk. But it also means that you can't do that at the detriment of third parties. We have raised Palestine. They are concerned about what's happening. We have not yet raised Western Sahara. It's a bit the same thing. And Iran feels threatened. And to build peace, there is an outreach. And I mean, sugarcoating is not always going to help. Sugar is sometimes good, but not always. We also have the situation of human rights defenders who feel threatened by the security cooperation that is being built up. And I would have two questions as a result of this comment. The first one, with regards to more of the peace-building aspects of the Abraham Accords, so moving beyond the transaction aspects, what are the initiatives that we can expect? And the second one goes directly to you, Minister of Defense, Gantz. You announced yourself in December last year that the Pegasus cooperation is largely stopped in terms of licensing new things and will only...
Can you repeat, please?
You announced in December last year that Pegasus licenses will only be issued to 37 countries anymore, and these 37 countries neither included Bahrain nor UAE. So for me, the question is, first of all, is that statement still valid? And second, do you also stop the maintenance of licenses that have been issued before December, and how do you overall assess the use of spyware on human rights defenders in the Middle East?
So that was our comment from the audience. I would like to give you the opportunity to answer.
Yeah, I would say two sentences, really. First of all, I hope that you will fly from the Gulf countries to Tel Aviv and come and see us, of course, and that we will see much more flights. I suggest us all to remember that peace doing is also not a hike in the park. There are challenges, there are issues that you have to overcome. We all may face some future crises on different issues and different agreements, etc., etc. But I suggest that we will be as decisive in doing peace as we are while doing war. And I'm sure that if we will be decisive in expanding and reaching peace between the countries that already signed the Abraham Accords, first and foremost, we will flourish on this one, but we will see more other countries daring to join this trend. I think it's very important. Secondly, we revisited our export license for the companies to different countries. This is definitely in place. We should not forget that this is contracts that are being done between a private company in another country under the framework of whatever is being licensed, and that's very much the case. We are learning the different complaints from different places, and we will constantly revisit our policies about those issues in the future.
Thank you very much. We had one question here from the lady. Please, if you could introduce yourself.
working on the Abraham
Sorry, can you
Accords.
repeat this? We couldn't hear
Yes,
you.
Kelly Craft, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations,
Okay.
who worked with Defense Minister Gantz on the Abraham Accords. And I'm interested to see in your conversations with President Abbas, was the Palestinian youth, because I find that they have seen the people to people, they have seen the economic benefits, they have seen all the benefits. And are they now demanding that they too can receive these same benefits that they're seeing, whether it's medical care in Bahrain from the Sheba Medical Center, whether it's educational opportunities from Morocco? I mean, there's opportunities that I know that they are looking at very closely, and as the future of the Palestinian Authority.
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for your involvement and support of the Abraham Accords, of course. And I do believe it will have a positive impact about the future of the Palestinians as well. I was disappointed at the beginning from the refusal of the Palestinians themselves to support the Abraham Accords, such as the peace accords. But I hope that eventually they will overcome those objections and they will join this process and they will be supportive of such things. I think it is with the responsibility and the possibility of the Palestinian leadership to move forward in peace with increased security coordination, with increased education, Medicare, economical prosperity. This is for the benefit of their own people, whether they do it together with us, Israel and the Palestinians, or whether they do it with the support they can get from other countries around the world, to include the Gulf countries and others. This is more important for them. I believe for the Palestinians, from my perspective, a moderate, realistic leadership can get them to a better future than a radical Hamas terrorist organization that will change the whole future of the Palestinian in terms of being a prosperous economy and prosperity of the society. It can become radical as Hamas are. So I hope that the Palestinians will choose the right way. If they do so, we will be there.
Thank you very much. I think, please. Excuse me. Sorry, the microphone.
That the honeymoon,
but
that they see that the honeymoon is over and that this is enduring. And I think that's very promising.
So
And that's thanks to your relationships that you've built with the country.
we have a few other questions, but thank you so much for your question. Thank you. I think the gentleman here on the, I think you had a question or comment, I was told. Please, Mr. Laschet, if you could introduce yourself to the panelists.
I don't have a question. I'm a member of the German Parliament and was Chancellor candidate for the CDU. We lost, Olaf Scholz won the elections, but nevertheless we support the new government in supporting this process in the region. I think this is a very, very important moment for the region, and our guest from the United Emirates, Arab Emirates, Mr. Gargash, mentioned Jean Monnet and Robert Schuman. And in fact, that is the situation. At that time, 5 years after the Second World War, a terrible world war with Holocaust and all those crimes the Germans did, the French gave the hand to a new cooperation and started the European Union, and they started with coal and steel, and this was the idea to work more together. And we are just in this moment that states who are 50 years against Israel now make this step, say we have the possibility to cooperate and everybody will have a win situation. Even the Palestinians will have a better situation if they agree to the support. And my idea is that we Germans should support this process. Mm-hmm. We started last week in the Deutscher Bundestag a group, Mr. Lambsdorff, no, it's not longer here, is member, liberal, a green member of the Bundestag, and Heiko Maas, the former foreign minister. We will work with all different democratic parties support this process from Germany on. And my question is, what is your expectation towards Germany? You are negotiating between each other, but what can Germany do to support this process in the region?
So maybe Deputy Prime Minister first and then...
Yes, thank you very much. I think that Germany is a great world player and leader in different administration, whether it was Chancellor, the former Chancellor, whether it's the new government of Germany. They are very much supportive of peace and security in our region with different countries, not just the Abraham Accords, but other countries as well. I hope and believe that Germany will continue this strategic approach via the regional aspect, of course, and obviously on a bilateral level. We have great relations with them. And it, you know, especially when it comes from Germany, who actually is, can be seen in many ways to be, in a way, a role model from being such responsible for horror before to such promoter of peace today. And I think that countries should very much accept it, appreciate that, and go along this this course of action. Being the strongest economy in Europe, I think that Germany can really be supportive of such future trends as well.
Thank you very much. We have one question from the lady here.
So can I comment on this, please?
I comment? Can we combine it with the question from the lady? Sure. Then I give you time to answer. Maybe there's also. Sure.
Thank you. I'll ask a very simple question so I get a specific and a simple.
Could you introduce yourself?
Yeah,
please?
I'm Hina Rabbani-Kar. I'm the former Foreign Minister of Pakistan from 2010 to 13 and Member of Parliament right now. So my question is to the my friend Anwar Gargash and the minister from Bahrain. It is clear that many countries together, lots of Muslim countries, took a certain position, not because they hated Israel, because they felt that the Palestinian people needed to be taken care of and be treated in a certain way. When there is a diversion from that position taken by these two countries, then clearly the credibility of that position being changed into this and how this plays out will be exceptionally important to either encourage or discourage other countries who are looking at these two countries. So my question specifically is that through this interaction, what do you think have you been able to engineer in terms of positive change for the Palestinian people so that many countries and many people who are looking at these two important, very important countries within the Muslim world and the actions that they've taken to see if they can credibly stick to their stance of support for the Palestinians and look at the regional, requirements and perhaps show the way forward. So specifically, what can we feel in terms of change being engineered for the Palestinians?
Thank you very much for your question. So, Dr. Al Khalifa, you wanted to say a comment about Mr. Laschet's comment, and then maybe you can also answer the question. Thank you.
Saad. Well, many countries have supported the Abraham Accords from the very beginning, and Germany was one of the first countries to do so. We would like to express our appreciation to Germany in general, but to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in particular. They have offered to host a trilateral youth program, to have a Bahraini, Israeli, and German youth to be hosted here in Germany to foster the people-to-people relation. And such programs, we do believe, are very much important because this is more about the people-to-people relationship and the youth more than the governments and the official aspect of that. So thanks to Germany for that, and we look forward to the implementation of this program, hopefully later this year. As for my colleague from Pakistan, sorry, I'm giving you my back, but we cannot change history. We can change the present, and we can share the future. I believe that with the steps that are being taken would certainly enhance whatever hindrance there has been for the past so many decades. We all share the burden with our Palestinian brothers. And we certainly will continue our efforts to intensifying any discussions, dialogue, to reach a just and a comprehensive solution for the Palestinian people. Coordination is ongoing, and we certainly do believe this will take time. It will not happen overnight, but we remain to be focused and determined, and channels of discussions and dialogue must be continuous and reflective of all of the concerns that have been for the past many, many decades.
If, before I give you the floor, Dr. Anwar, may I combine the question with another one that we just received via email. What can and want the Arab states do to stop the conflict between the Palestinians, especially Fatah and Hamas? That's a question Mr. Markus Reinhold asked, and if you wouldn't mind to answer both these questions. Thank you.
Well, again, I want to say that the Abrahamic Accords is strategic. It is one of the most important, positive, strategic things to happen over the last decade or two. It is about leadership. And when you take a position like that, of course, there are many people who cling to old formulas that have not worked before. And we obviously have very little to show for. To the lady who spoke also, the Abrahamic Accord is not transactional. I don't see it transactional when it helps end the violence that erupted in Gaza. I don't see it transactional when it stops the annexation of Palestinian lands. And I don't see it also transactional when there is several other Arab countries that are able to talk to Israel and to be also more conduits for peace. This is a major shift. Now, if we put that within a larger context, the UAE believes, and again to the lady, the EU MP, you can fly from the UAE anytime to Tehran. Flights have not stopped. They've always been going to Tehran. And this is part of a wider view. Our wider view is the region moving forward has to be more about bridges, has to be more about roads, rather than trenches. So we feel that the Abrahamic Accord, our outreach to Iran or Turkey or any other country, is part of an overall regional view, a view that says, of course we have problems, of course we have issues, and central among many of these problems is a two-state solution. But our ability to help is more through dialogue, more through communication, more through cooperation, and not through not talking to each other. So we believe that this is extremely important. As far as the Palestinian efforts, we follow with interest what Egypt is trying to do. And we hope that the Egyptians are very successful or are successful in unifying the long differences that are between Gaza and the West Bank. And we think that this is another building block in what we hope is a future that is not mired in conflict, but a future that is set firmly in cooperation and in dialogue.
Thank you very much. We have time for one more question, and I believe there is one here.
Hi, my name is Peter Neumann. I'm a professor at King's College in London. And my question to, I guess, all of you, even though you don't all have to answer, is what do we expect for the future, especially in terms of security cooperation? Do you anticipate there are going to be joint exercises? Are there going to be formal channels, formalized intelligence sharing? Should we even expect perhaps at some point you developing common positions on conflicts like in Syria or in other places? What's your vision for the development of this over the next perhaps 5 or 10 years?
Yeah.
Deputy Prime Minister first, please.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, I would like to join my friend from Bahrain, Abdullah, saying that we cannot change the history, but we must manage the present and shape the future. And I think you are very much right to say so. This is what we are trying to do. However, you know, We cannot change the history, but we must take some lessons learned from there. This is really much the case of Israel when we are not stuck with our historical fights, but we are trying to preserve our future security, because security in the Middle East is the major issue that promotes stability. And when you have security and stability, you have better economy. When you have better economy, you have better relations, you have better human rights, you have better opportunities for everybody. So I think that really the security aspect is pretty much a cornerstone for all future positive development. Specifically to your questions, of course, that we will try to promote as much cooperation as we can. We cannot, I mean, it's very hard to be very specific of what would be the future actions or the future practical aspects of it, but the most important is that we can be assured of going in the right direction, strategic direction. And I think that the strategic directions of constant communication between the sides, cooperating on different issues on the three levels of government strategic aspects, of cooperation between organizations, businesses, security organizations, etc., and people to people, these three layers will ensure a positive future, and I'm very happy with it.
And I would like to give you the word now, Dr. Anwar.
This is a Jean Monnet and Robert Schuman moment. This is not a moment of confrontation in the region. This is a moment of new thinking. This is a moment of de-escalation. And we intend to use the Abrahamic Accord as a tool among other tools to create a better region, a region of peace and stability.
Dr. Al-Khalifa, what moment is this? What are we witnessing here?
Minister Gantz, when he visited Bahrain early this month, he wrote an op-ed in the Gulf Daily News. He called it the Abraham Causeway. And I believe all what we are doing closely together is building bridges and causeways of prosperity and stability. And I believe that all of us collectively need to have this as successful as possible. The more successful the Abraham Accords are, the more fruition that we have from the bilateral relations with Israel, the more others would be encouraged to join, but the more people would be involved in the development of their country and the prosperity of the wider region.
Thank you very much. I really would love to thank you all for joining us today. We see there are still a lot of discussions that actually probably will happen and should happen about the accords, about the future of the region, about a possible agreement with the Palestinians. Thank you, Dr. Anwar, for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Al-Khalifa, Deputy Prime Minister. Thank you very much, and you all. And I wish you a very good day here in Munich.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.